On this Women's Day special episode, we're spotlighting leaders proving that the future of AI must be built with responsibility at its core. Today, we're joined by Sarah Bird, Chief Product Officer of Responsible AI at Microsoft, where she leads the engineering efforts behind safe, fair, and trustworthy AI at global scale. She founded Microsoft's first responsible AI research group and helped shape the company's responsible AI standard. Her work powers systems like Copilot and advances open source tools such as FairLearn and Interpret ML.
Sarah, welcome to the CIO podcast.
Thanks for having me.
One of the first questions that came in was that at 19 years old, you were helping design the processor inside the Xbox 360 through UT Austin's co-op program. And chip design, as you know very well, is about managing heat, power, timing, and failure modes at the physical level. How does that hardware discipline at that young age, where a single gate level error can break millions of consoles, shape how you think about failure modes in AI systems that are fundamentally probabilistic?
I've just always been a systems thinker. And so first it was just looking at the hardware systems. And as you said, what kind of testing can we do? Like one of the things that I created at IBM was a test simulation system that allowed us to find errors earlier so that then we didn't have to find them, after we had already developed the chip. And what do I work on now? Well, testing systems, but for a very different type of error. And so I think, I started with the hardware and really saw that as very interesting system. And then it became pretty clear, like, well, these systems feel pretty dumb. Why shouldn't systems, learn and adapt? And that's how I got started in AI. And then you realize no system is that interesting if you only look at the technology. You have to look at the human component as well. And so that's why I love my job, because we have to think about the hardware and the software and adaptive learning and, as you said, probabilistic errors, but also the people part, because the people are a huge part of the story. And so I feel like I'm just doing the same thing, but at a different scale, and honestly, at a different pace, because at least at that time, hardware was not produced very quickly, and AI every single day is a new day.
Sarah, just again taking you back into memory lane, and then we'll bring you back to the current time. Your PhD dissertation at Berkeley was called Optimizing Resource Allocations for Dynamic Interactive Applications. You built Pacora, a system that predicts how to allocate cores, cache, memory, bandwidth in real time. And that maps strikingly to your current work, where you allocate safety resources, compute for content filtering, latency budgets, guardrails, engineering attention for red teaming across AI systems. Do you think there is a line that goes across? Is it a coincidence, or was that a choice, according to you?
It is still resource allocation and trying to make trade-offs, using, techniques that are more adaptive and intelligent. And I think about that every day right now when we think about agentic technology, because, agents, what's so exciting and powerful is they are dynamic. But if we just apply, for example, the same security controls that historically have been, very static, they're not going to let us get the power of the technology and also the benefit. And so I feel like my thesis, while it was allocating resources in the operating system dynamically, it's kind of the same problem, and just with different tools. And so I think that's maybe something that is been important for me in my career, and one of my strengths is being able to see these same patterns and apply them in different places as the technology evolves, because we all know the game is changing so quickly. And so you have to take what you know, but look at a totally different thing and apply it.
Sarah, in 2017, you founded the Fate Research Group at Microsoft: Fairness, Accountability, Transparency, and Ethics in AI for people who are not well versed with Fate. And this is before most companies had even begun thinking about AI ethics. Then you left for Facebook and helped form their AI ethics group too. At that time, and I would say even now, what was it like trying to talk to engineers and CEOs and executives in 2016 and 17 that this work mattered, when there was so much pressure that, hey, we want to ship fast and we want to scale bigger, etc.? Tell our listeners a little bit about that.
So I distinctly remember the conversation at Microsoft. So first, I'll give a little backstory of kind of how I got into it. I was working on at the time what was kind of early version of reinforcement learning called contextual bandits, and the whole idea is that this technology can sort of explore and make decisions. Right? It'll decide if you use different personalization to show you a sports article to see if you like sports versus an article about pottery or something. And we're talking to customers about how, where might you want to use this technology to really think about how to advance the state of the tag. And customers were asking things like, oh, awesome. Can we use it to automatically interview people? And it was like, well, maybe, but should you? And so I was fortunate enough at that time to be sitting with a bunch of other still like amazing people in the field, like Hannah Wallach, and we kind of got together and said we need to really think about these issues. And actually, the first paper that I wrote, and that was about connecting this explore exploit decision technology with the history of experimental ethics and saying what can we learn from the non kind of AI domains about how to think about these problems. But then we had these ideas. We wanted to go pitch to Microsoft's leadership that we were going to create this group. And I think Microsoft's leadership, one of the reasons I love doing the work at this company is they are very long-term thinking. And, the belief now that we, can better articulate it is you can't really have an AI future without responsible AI. Like nobody wants to use a technology that they don't trust. But so when we went to pitch it, I think that instinct was already there. And so they're like, yes, absolutely, we should do this. What does it mean to do it? And, our response back was, we have no idea, like I think we kind of do this or whatever. And so it's very fun now to look back and see. I think every year we have no idea compared to what we figure out, in the next year. And so it's been, quite a journey to start from one little research group to building up the policy function at, the Microsoft building up the policy function and building up the engineering team that I now lead and all of that. But it was definitely fun to be at something that early when you actually have no idea what you're even proposing, really.
At your PhD committee, there was Burton Smith. He was a legendary parallel computing architect who, designed the Terra MT and the hypertransport. And he was, focused in on eliminating idle resources in computing, making every transistor productive. Where the lessons that you took from? Are there things that you apply currently in what you and how you think about your work, Sarah?
So I feel like I learned so much from Burton. He was really the like the main partner in my thesis work, and we worked extremely closely on developing a lot of that. But at the same time, he was helping really take Microsoft's like quantum computing program to the next level, which was very early then. Now is a very interesting and exciting state. And I think I certainly learned technical things from him, but probably what struck me the most, and that I really took away from it is the excitement and energy he brought to each new problem, but also like fresh eyes. Like when he was working in quantum and I was interning and working side by side with him, I'd come in and he would present all of this quantum computing stuff on the whiteboard to me, even though I wasn't working in quantum. And hey, I think if we use low temperature logic, it can connect to the quantum computer, and this is going to be amazing. And so that thing that just not getting set in your ways and just approaching a problem kind of from first principles and saying, what can we really do here? But the other thing I appreciate about Burton, like, is he's, as you said, just a legend in computer architecture and parallel computing. And at the time I was doing my thesis was the first time we started getting, multi-core processors on a single chip. And so parallel computing again, but different. And there was so much debate in the field about, okay, well, all these ideas failed before, so they're surely going to fail now. And of course, some of them still didn't make sense, but some of them did make sense with that technology shift. And I think Burton was a person who was just amazing at that, like looking back and saying, oh, this is a great idea, we should reapply, versus, oh, I think this still won't work, where there was a lot of people that were either like, oh, we already figured this all out, you should just do that. And there were some people that were absolutely in the mode of, well, it didn't work before, so it's never going to work. And I think he was really great at just like actually getting into the details and looking at that. And that's something I found so important in my work too. Like what we see the technology with AI changing so quickly. So what was true a year ago might not be true today. And so you have to keep saying, okay, we tried it, it didn't work, but now it works. And I think like a good example of this is AI, like responsible AI evaluation. If you wanted to have an automated test to look at if a system was producing hateful content before, good luck. Like that was something that only humans can do. But new generative AI technology can be so helpful in that. And so I think that that's something that I found just really important as a person working at the cutting edge of technology, is that mindset of just reapproaching things and not taking the past as a given.
No, that's great to hear. He was a legend. There's no question.
He was fantastic. I miss him every day.
Yeah. Sarah, shifting to open source, you have co-founded and led 5 major open source projects. And there's a obvious argument for open sourcing AI capabilities. But there's obviously concern about open sourcing safety tools, where there's a point that you might be giving away the defensives. What is your perspective in terms of open source safety, and how does it make the ecosystem less safe or more safe?
I think open source is just so incredibly important in the ecosystem, and I actually love that AI, I think, not only has actual open source in terms of the code, but so much of the AI field has always been built on publishing papers. And so there's also really sort of open source in terms of the information. And I think that's enabled us to go so much faster as a field. And we try to take the same approach with responsible AI, which is we partner very closely with what you consider also our competitors and partners like OpenAI and Anthropic and Google, to figure out how can we learn from each other, share what we're doing, and take it to the next level, because we think that's going to allow everyone to do more with AI. And so I think that it's really important to have this open innovation ecosystem where anyone can come and contribute, anyone can sort of inspect what's going on. But then to your point, there are some things that probably don't make sense to open source. And so to be really thoughtful about what is the threat model for that. For example, we might not want to open source an AI model that is a huge step forward in the state of the art, because an open source AI model is much harder to control and defend than a closed source model. For example, safety post training is actually quite effective today as one of the tools in our toolkit, but safety post training can be completely undone with an open source model, is something that's been shown. And so I think for any of these, we're trying to look at the threat model and then kind of the risk reward trade-off, because nothing is going to be zero risk, but there's just huge rewards that are possible when you put things into open source or kind of into the open innovation ecosystem. And so I personally like to bias in that direction. But there's lots of cases where we said it doesn't make sense, and the right thing to do is really make sure that we can offer this technology in a more controlled way.
Sarah, I was talking to the CEO of Open UK, and one of the things that came out was, what is the clear definition of open source in AI? Because there is some question, because different people maybe have different. What is your perspective in terms of what is open source in AI?
This question is really depends on what the job is to be done, right? And so some version of open source might be that it allows you to have the technology and not be, dependent on a provider of it. And it's about the complete control. Some version of open source models are because people care about the customization and the ability to fine tune it. Some people want to be able to inspect the model weights or inspect for security concerns. And so the definition of what is kind of open source or what is transparent or what is interpretable depends on what you're actually trying to achieve. And so I always try to look at those things through that lens, which is it's it's a tool in service of a goal, and you have to know that goal before you can sort of say, does this version meet the bar of what you're trying to achieve?
Okay, so it really depends on what you're trying to do and the objective and the goal.
Yeah, we see this a lot in, like, interpretability, where people will say, like, AI systems are supposed to be interpretable, and you're like, "Okay, I can show you all the model weights. Is that interpretable?" Well, it depends on what question you're trying to ask, right? And so like, we even have with governments, right? There's places where we think it's important to be transparent about certain things, to answer certain types of questions or provide certain types of oversight, but it's not just that every single thing about the government is completely transparent. And so I think that the point of open is the same, where it depends on what you care about to talk about what is the appropriate sort of definition of open source there.
Switching over to evals, you had written on LinkedIn that building evaluators is going to become the focus of systems and software over the next decade. Now, that's a pretty strong claim. You're basically saying that in a world where AI can write code, which, as you know, lately, what we've been hearing about, the hardest remaining problem is knowing whether the code is correct, safe, and good. Tell our listeners why you think and why you believe that building evaluators is so critical.
I've been saying this for a long time, that evaluation is one of the most important tools, and honestly still one of the hardest problems. But I feel like I'm actually surprised myself at how true that statement is today. And so I'm sure it's just going to keep going. And, I think when I originally started saying it, it's very hard to understand in generative AI if a system is working well without evaluators, because this technology is so general purpose. There's so many different inputs that can come into the system and so many different outputs, that if you don't have a clear-eyed point of view on what does quality mean, what types of risk are acceptable, what types of risk are unacceptable, all of that, and then you also have to be able to measure that at scale. Otherwise, you're going to have like a really hard time understanding if you built the thing you want, or if this thing is safe to use, if it's ready to ship. And so, evaluation has kind of been a cornerstone of both our just product development process and thinking about, have we built a good product for customers, but then also in our risk assessment process to determine, have we also built a safe and secure product for customers. But I think in the last year, it's gotten even more exciting and kind of wild than that. So we have teams that are experimenting with, like many others in the industry, never reviewing a single line of code. All they're doing is writing, in essence, instructions and input spec for, agentic technology, and then they're writing validator functions, which are basically evals, to say, is the output doing what I want? And there's a huge amount of code generated in between that no human ever looks at. And so it's gone from, okay, you're a little crazy if you just build something and don't eval it, to you're not even going to be building something without evals, because the only thing you're going to build is the eval itself, right? And so I think it's been really wild to see this transformation. And those teams, I think, are going at, in some cases, like an order of magnitude faster pace than our, more traditional engineering teams. And so that tasteful function of being able to say, what do I really want this system to do, and how do I validate that it's actually doing that, I think is just becoming even more important for everybody in the future of AI.
Yeah. So for other your peers, chief AI officers who are listening in, does it have implications on where they should be investing in tools or technologies? What do you have a message for them on that part, Sarah?
I think what's so fascinating about the space right now, and leading in this space, and something I think about sort of every day in terms of my own team, is that AI is both an amazing tool that we can use to sort of create new product experiences, create new things for our customers, but it's also totally changing the way we work. And so the example I just gave is, one of those where it doesn't matter what that team's building, the way they're building it is totally different now, and the way they're working is totally different. And so I think we're finding that we need kind of, like, when I'm leading my team, like, equal parts investment in investing in how my team is using AI to make themselves more productive, to change how they're working, and investments in taking AI to, innovate for our customers and things. And the other change that's come with this that has been really interesting is I know people who've been in the field a long time and are very deep in AI, but they've moved up a certain amount in an organization, and so, right, you're meeting large teams, you're mostly in meetings, you manage managers, and every single one of these people now is like, "I have to go home and play with the technology on the weekends. I have to build it myself. I have to get my hands dirty," because otherwise you don't have any intuition because it's changing so quickly. And that's, I think, a shift for a lot of people who have maybe been reasonably hands off in code, now finding that they need to go and revisit that to actually be a good leader in the space, which I think is very different than a few years ago.
Microsoft co-founded the C2PA, the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, and they recently published their work evaluating different watermarking, fingerprinting, and other under different adversarial conditions. And your conclusion was that no single solution is foolproof. So one of the questions that came in was: are we winning or losing the authenticity challenge? And where does the technology stand today? This is someone in the media world that's asked this question.
First of all, this is just an incredibly important question, and everyone should be asking it and discussing it, because figuring out how to kind of get this right for the world together is like one of the most important things we need to do. One of the things that I'm struck by, first of all, is that there were many people that were concerned when the printing press came out that that was going to lead to significant challenges of, disinformation and information integrity challenges. And so we've actually been having this same conversation with each new kind of content creation technology jump that's existed, or content distribution thing, the internet, social media, all of that. And I think rightfully so, because each of these does change the game, and it changes, obviously, both what adversaries are going to use and what tools that people have available to kind of defend against this and understand. But it's not a new problem, and it's not a problem that technology can solve alone. It's something where we have to skill, people have to understand what tools are available to them and skill up. Like most people that are kind of grew up with the internet know you're supposed to check the source of information before you just trust it. But I think I'm dating myself, whatever, 20 some more years ago, there was all those chain mails going around all the time when everyone first really came online in email with all these warnings of things. People know not to listen to those anymore, for example. And so I think there's certainly going to be this mix, having to help everyone, learn how to work the new way here. But the laser study that we just published that was looking at the tech is, I think, trying to say that, yes, we're not going to just go build a perfect deepfake detector and solve this problem, but technology can help. And so I actually found the report, as we were actually doing this study, I think really encouraging to show if we put a combination of tools together, so putting together C2PA, or kind of content provenance that helps you track the source, with more adversarially robust techniques like, invisible watermarking, with more user-friendly techniques like visible watermarks. Each of these has different points in the trade-off space, but if we can put them all together, that is giving some exciting tools for people to use to start, figuring out the new way to work with this challenge. But again, people have to know how to use them. They have to be applied properly. And so the answer to the question of where are we? I think we're innovating as quickly as we can on tools that people can use. There are a lot of people out there trying to educate people about this, but until we actually get widespread kind of adoption of some of these capabilities, it's going to be really hard. So C2PA, for example, there's a lot of focus on putting it on AI-generated content. But the ecosystem really only works if people are also marking non-AI generated content, because you want to say, I can look at the source of any piece of content, and that will help me reason about whether or not I consider it, authoritative in that context. And so adversaries are always going to try to remove that mark. And so if most content is unmarked, you're not going to really be able to use this as a trust signal.
Is there any specific technology that you think has potential? And people have talked about blockchain, watermarking, all kinds of things out there. I mean, you obviously have your finger on all these important things because this goes to the root of our democracy and the pillars of democracy, especially during times of elections and things, Sarah.
For us in practice, we're finding the most powerful combination for AI generation, which is the part I'm focused on, is to use C2PA and that cryptographic signature combined with sort of invisible watermark techniques that are harder for adversaries to remove, that allow us to detect if something came from us, and then also combined with sort of visible watermarks where it makes sense. In some applications, visible watermarks don't make sense, like more at the platform level. But for a consumer application, a visible watermark can also be very helpful. And so that triple combination of technologies is, at least where we're at today. We're always looking at the gaps, though, and what other people are kind of creating and seeing if we can bring more kind of into that toolkit. But we're feeling those three at least are all important, and they don't replace each other.
Sarah, you talked about responsible AI as the ultimate group project, which brings together technology, society, and law. And you run a team that has engineers, linguists, anthropologists, policy, and all kinds of other experts. Tell our listeners what is the real management challenge of running a team where there's a machine learning engineer and anthropologist need to agree on a shipping decision? Because most of our listeners generally run a far more homogeneous teams.
So first of all, yeah, like it's very hard to do it even just in a durable team, right? You all need to learn to speak the same language, appreciate what the other person is bringing to the table, and all of that. And but the thing is, in a lot of ways, it's easier to do that in a single team because you have the benefit of both time and sort of that organizational closeness that you're all in the same team. One of the things we found with responsible AI is depending on what we're focused on, you need deep expertise. But it's not possible to have all of that expertise in a single team, kind of no matter how much you build it, because we're on the forefront here. And so a thing that's been very important to us is also not so focused on is it in our team, but how do we find the right person and how do we get them to come and work with us? So we work really closely with Microsoft Research, who has many different kinds of experts. We work with external academic experts as well. Or Microsoft's legal team under Brad Smith has many different specialists on whether that's on like defending democracy or copyright or any specific issue. And so we have to find that set of like sometimes we don't even know these skills exist. We have to find them and then we have to work with a skill set that we've like never seen before. And I think the way so certainly as a leader, one of the things you can do is create an environment where like collaboration and doing more together and creating space for learning to speak the same language is all really valued. But then also I've been very lucky for that my team started as just me. And so I've been able to build it myself. And so I've heavily hired for these people that work across, that don't care about ownership, that don't care about organizational boundaries, and just want to solve the problem and see the value of doing more together. But that instinct of, I want to focus on having the maximum impact. I want to solve the most important problem, and I'll work with whomever and I'll use whatever tool to get it done. I think that's the unifying thing that has really made this possible for us.
A lot of these companies now have responsible AI boards, ethics boards, governance boards, etc. Where should some of these people start, or what would be the one or two or three key things that they should be looking at? And these are, in many cases, large manufacturing companies, large financial services companies, large healthcare companies. What would be your suggestion, advice to them?
A lot of people start first with kind of what's the governance and accountability model. And I think that makes a lot of sense because if you have that in place, then you kind of have the hooks to start all of the other things happening. And so I think that's where you see organizations start a lot. And I think that's been important for us too. So we, for example, created a release review process, something very normal, right before teams ship. But that allowed us to have a place where we can bring in experts and say, have we done the right thing? And then realize, oh, we don't know how to do the right thing. We have to go invest in the right thing and all that. And so I think creating that place that kind of gets the flywheel started is one of the things that's been really important for us. The other advice I would give is that you do have to invest in in-house expertise, but you don't have to build everything from scratch. So kind of an easy example, and the EU AI Act, I think, has started nicely describing more of these roles separately. But what a foundation model builder needs to do is different than someone who's building on top of a foundation model. So, for example, if Microsoft is building a foundation model, we're going to be the ones who are testing if it has certain dangerous capabilities, like the ability to accelerate the development of biological weapons. But if you're, a top financial organization, then you're going to have to test whether or not it actually makes sense in your domain, in the application, in your risk tolerance. And there's no way that I could do that for you, right? I don't have that expertise. I don't know your application context. And so the risks are going to look different when you apply it than just the risk of the raw technology itself. And so investing in people who both understand the technology and understand your domain is going to be just completely required. But they shouldn't be starting from scratch, because this is, we talked about open source earlier, right? This is an ecosystem where everybody is putting out sort of open tools, publishing, trying to put out best practices. And so you really want to adopt everything that's already working and then have these people focus on really taking it to your differentiation in your organization. But the other thing I think that's important is the state of the art in responsible AI, fortunately, is moving very quickly. Like, we're trying to every single day invent new things. And so you need people that are going to be curious and say, wow, actually, there's way better evaluation tools than there was 3 months ago, because AI understands code better than it used to. And so I think that investing in that hub that's really going to keep you on the cutting edge and apply this in your organization is something that's been really important, I think, for the organizations that are doing this very well.
So, since you've talked about that there is a community, as you said, they don't need to start from scratch. Sarah, is there something, do you think, where the responsible AI community gets it wrong, or do you think the conventional wisdom in this field is sometimes mistaken?
I think the community is very diverse, and there's kind of some bimodal parts to it. And so I guess I'll tell you where this is not my opinion alone. I think there are many people in the community that hold this opinion. But I think today, if you look at the press or you look at X or something, a huge percentage of the conversation in responsible AI is about these existential risk of AI. And it's, I think, unfortunate, because I think it creates unnecessary fear, but also, probably even more importantly, it kind of takes the oxygen away for the important conversations about the challenges of applying the technology right now. So I think the conversation around information integrity, that's a challenge we have right now that we need to focus on, and we need more innovation there. We need more education there. The question of how people's jobs are changing today, also super important. And so I think that the kind of where you see the attention right now, I think, on this existential risk is getting it wrong, and that we really need to focus on, in real applications that are live with the technology today, what do we need to do to make this technology more trustworthy, making it easier for people to use, making it more in control. So I think, that would probably be my big one.
What is your thought? What is your perspective on OpenClaw, just agentic AI per se, but OpenClaw and what's happening in there? Tell our listeners a little bit about your perspective.
I quite like kind of OpenClaw as an example for the field, because, first of all, I've been saying for a little while, and I think OpenClaw just demonstrates this so much better than I could say it, that agents are really what I think a lot of people want this technology to be, right? I don't want a system on the side that I just chat with and that was as good as we could do a couple of years ago. I want something that I give complete tasks to and it just goes and gets it done, right? That's a just incredibly more powerful paradigm. But at the same time, that opens up huge surface area, and you see that with OpenClaw too. And so if we think about how to really secure that, it's very different than the chat features. Like chat features, we can say, okay, at the end of the day, there's a human in the loop. So as long as they're educated about how to use it and stuff, a lot of things you can kind of tolerate. Where if this is going and it's able to access your bank account and it's making decisions on your behalf and it's taking untrusted data in, so it could be hijacked by adversaries, right? The surface area and the risk is very different. And so something that my team has been working on prior to OpenClaw is exactly how do we make sure that you have controls built into for agents. And so this includes runtime controls to make sure agents stay on task, security controls such as identity or appropriate sort of resource access controls, making sure that you can actually observe these things so you can debug when it goes wrong, or better yet, detect it's going off the rails before and go to the human. Make sure we have deep security integration in place so that your security operations team gets alerted as soon as it seems like your agent is under attack. And then, of course, trying to manage this at scale, because most people don't want just one agent. They want, like organizations want thousands of agents. And so you need to know where to look, right? I can't just monitor every single trace of every single agent myself. And so we've been working on some Microsoft, products. The names are Agent 365 and Foundry Control Plane is for developers, exactly building these pieces together. But the idea is we have to build these foundational observability technologies, and we've been contributing some of that back to OpenTelemetry. We need to build foundational control technologies. And so I think OpenClaw just shows why it's so important we do this, both because of the risk, but also because people want it, because we need to enable these incredibly compelling use cases, because it empowers people to spend less time on, I just watched a presentation on OpenClaw like 5 minutes before this, where they're saying, I'm spending way less time on logistics and way more time with my children, right? And we want people to be able to do that, but we need to put the safeguards in place. And so I think it's just a great example that brings into the public consciousness the excitement and the importance of responsible AI in this work.
For the next generation of AI leaders who will inherit whatever we build, what do you want them to inherit? What is the system that you're trying to leave behind for them?
I think certainly one of the things I want to leave behind, at least in the technology field, is just making it more open for every type of person. And I don't mean that from any dimension, man or woman, but also just think differently, right? We talked about earlier that we have linguists contributing. And I think that the future of AI is absolutely going to need that. And so I both want to help make an environment where we can have more types of people contribute and shape the future of AI, and then also just model an example of a different way someone can look or dress or any of that, with myself, because I think that the example you gave of my own life, I don't remember who those people are. I don't know where they came from. I had a very short interaction with them, and that had a significant impact on my life. I'm sure they have no idea. They don't remember who they are or that they were in my class, right? And so I think small things can have, significant effects on people, and you don't know it. And so really trying to make an environment where everybody can, have that moment of inspiration where they feel empowered to contribute. They feel like they can just go do it, because I think honestly, AI and the technology makes that even more powerful. I think we're absolutely entering the era where anybody can have an idea and they can just go make it real. They can build it with their own hands immediately. And so I hope we also create many more of those opportunities for everyone in the world.
Oh, that's fantastic. Sarah, at the end, we have a lightning round of questions, just one word answers, very short. So let's give it a shot, okay?
Okay.
Interpretability or robustness, if you could only have one?
Robustness.
Open source or closed source for frontier models?
Closed.
Closed.
Yeah, I think for the most frontier, closed. I think that it's very hard to control open.
Red teaming, human-led or AI-led?
Both.
Okay. EU AI Act, is it a help or a hindrance?
I'm probably on the both category for that too. There's certainly things I find frustrating in it, but I think that regulation is important for building trust.
PyTorch or TensorFlow?
PyTorch.
The responsible AI standard, Sarah, is it a living document or is it already outdated?
Well, we have a new one, so I guess it's outdated.
Sarah, you had a hardware and a software career, unlike most people. Which career taught you more, hardware or software?
Ooh, software, I think.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. A final one, and you got to pick one. Favorite open source project that you have co-founded?
Oh, I really like ONNX because I like this idea of creating something that helps change the shape of the ecosystem and enables more people to contribute. And the idea with ONNX was exactly this, that if every AI framework person has to talk to every hardware thing, only big players are going to get to do it. And ONNX helped academics be able to contribute and go to all the hardware, all the frameworks and stuff. So I think that's the shape of that is very compelling to me, and I hope that we can do more of that in the future.
Sarah, thank you so much really for this amazing conversation. You had such an incredible career. You co-founded conferences, open source projects, ethics groups at two of the biggest companies in the world before anyone thought it was necessary. And you made a prediction that I think every leader in our audience should take seriously, that the future of software is not about building, it is about knowing whether what you have actually built works. And really what strikes me is the through line from hardware to safety, designing chips, and making sure we're doing it for the right reasons. So thank you for joining the CIO podcast. I really, really enjoyed it.
No, thank you so much. It's been fantastic. And I hope you and also all of the listeners are having as much fun as I am in this moment in AI, because I truly believe we can change the world.
Thanks for tuning in to the Chief AI Officer podcast with Sanjay Puri. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to leave a comment. We'd love to hear what you thought. And share it with someone curious about the future of AI. Join us every Friday right here on the CAIO podcast as we share more stories and insights from the leaders shaping what's ahead.